Also, there was a trail behind the old man's house here, so we would go catch this trail, go behind this house, and that really freaked them out. So I think why they put this bar here, and then there was 3 other energy points that would go off of it, is because it had something to do with something that was connected onto our necks. Because when we would go and stand here, it was like a rope would be pulling you into this building, and you just didn't want to go in there. So if you took a left path, it would be a different outcome. You'd get stuck. I remember standing here being stuck, and then somebody had to come help adjust the magnetism or something to get me back on point, on cue. And it must have been some type of AI checkpoint is what I'm thinking here, because it was definitely connecting us into the mainframe of something or network. So another reason why Rink was called Sabretooth, I don't know why I just thought of that, was because he was always ornery, and so we always told him that he should have like a sharp tooth sticking out of his mouth. But I do not believe that this was some type of parallel universe or whatever they tried to get you to believe here, because there are scientific explanations for a lot of things that did happen here. So they had this type of Bial neural net grid here. You could sense when we stopped in the black car here, and I was laying down on the old man's lap, the other car would pull up. What I would sense at this time would be like this demonic, hollow, evil presence outside the car. So when they found out that I was conscious and playing games with them, they took me outside, and right around this point here, there was a little girl that wasn't me at first, and this is where it gets really bizarre. She had black hair, and she just stood there and smiled at me really sinisterly. And what they did when the first times that I was passed out was they would carry me out of the car, and then they'd carry me in their arms, so then I'd go stand next to this demonic vessel, and then it would touch me on my forehead and extract information, create a biolink or whatever it was doing, and then they put me back in the car. Or they were collecting whatever material I guess they needed. So then another time when we got to this checkpoint, I was conscious. This time they'd mastered a little bit more. And this time when I felt the evil presence, saw a little girl outside of the car, and it was an identical copy of me. This demonic copy of me stood there, did the same thing, smiled. Sometimes she tried to grab your hand, and you did not want that to happen because of the entity that would come into this child. What I would see is another replica of my grandfather. This old man would open its mouth and reach his hand up into the sky and channel some type of being and make some crazy noise that I believe now is Lucifer, because this green line energy would come down, and then into this hollow golem, a flash of green went into the eyes, and you could tell that it was filled with something then. Then it would touch you on your forehead. It would extract a little ball of energy from your mind, some chi, some life force, some essence, whatever it was doing. And then it would get into a different car, the same identical car, with my grandfather and leave. When this child touched me, it felt like black suffocation, and it wanted to kill me right there. And I'm sure it did kill some children that weren't strong enough to handle this type of warfare. But what happened was a miracle, because divine intervention happened right there at the transfer spot. and angels surrounded me, and I felt their presence. I felt celestials. I felt God with me, and they never allowed me to be killed from the very beginning. So then I continued in this village. Then I get into the car and go back. Same thing, start the maze all over again. So this little girl and me, we had side battles each time, exchanges. And I won sometimes, and I would actually get to go in the other car. I don't think this happened all the time, though. This time I was taken back. Got back into this house. I remember I was like mortified because they'd carry you in their arms back upstairs into this windowless room that had bunk beds. So I was laying down, and they were so good at this that even Dave Morrow, one day I told what they were doing when I figured it out, making copies of us, and he couldn't even believe it. So I laid there feeling just helpless, and I prayed that God would answer me and that I would understand what was happening and why this was going on in my life. He let me know what to do next, and he was with me from the get-go, but he never told me the whys until adulthood, though. So I just trusted in his voice, and I made sure that his voice was louder than any of theirs, because I was already starting to get jammed with distractions and other frequencies, because I could have such a clear connection at first and talk to God. So they wanted us to believe that your own image was this evil golem thing. And, the whole thing was built on lies, and to get you to hate your image. And because you could hear your voice come out of it. And I just called it it. Would never give it a name. I hated that thing. But I just wonder how I was going to get home, because I missed my home. And eventually these two worlds meshed together so tightly, just like the corpus callosum joining point they had between these two houses combining. The two worlds meshed together so tightly, like a puzzle project hung on the wall or window that you just accepted, and being activated in these lucid projects, accepted as home. They could have had clones on this side of the building, is what I'm thinking too. They would always play nice, then they'd be evil, and then they'd play nice, and then they'd go back and forth, and always did that duality and dichotomy. They cut you some slack. They even brought me to India once to be healed when I lost my mind in the yellow Nazi house when I was older, and they let me be happy, promised me all sorts of things, and then as soon as it was over and I was pampered, they went right back into the mental abusive control measures. So they molded your mind to be like them since you were a toddler, so they knew exactly what buttons to push, everything. And some, I think, were allowed to have total recall later for the purpose of a little competition or puzzle project to test which kids that they didn't kill, that stayed with them, how far their neuroplasticity would go, how resilient they were, and other resonant factors, and how big the gap could go with amnesia or memory erasure in this parallel but congruent reality. Because it happened in the same time period, and I saw right through it, so I didn't get caught up in a lot of the fragmentation and the 1728 selves some people think we have, because it's their illusion. It's not true. There's only one you. So I was desperate to get home at this time, and I panicked. I was anxiety-ridden, bored. I was a risk taker because I never gave up. And they're consciousness thieves and soul suckers. They drain you constantly, but they did not win. And that's the biggest thing, because I never joined them. I just got caught up in their bullshit. And the ill-minded Illuminati, all secret societies, they're just all the strong delusion. Because I wasn't given over to them, because I'm not a reprobate mind like them. So, and I even witnessed to some of these people in the projects, my handlers even in the end, and I showed them that the angels of the Lord were stronger than them, because they're not fallen. And in the end, after seeing this, the wretched witch of this world and the henchmen and all the spiritual hierarchies and filth here, you just see that anything they have is so fleeting and temporal, and there's no prize at the end. There never was. Nothing. I mean, nothing they could ever offer you is worth anything in the eternal plan of salvation and the plan that your Father in heaven has for you. But you have to forsake all other gods before the Lord of hosts, of all hosts, will cover you in his blanket of spiritual goodness and kindness and restoration back to his spirit. And because I absorbed and processed so much, I knew what steps to take as I got smarter, more self-aware, stronger. So one day I'd see how far I could get down the steps, and the Nazis were in the kitchen downstairs, and I'd have Dave distract them. And then I got out the door and went to this Resident Evil barn. And I knew if I didn't do something, for these people and I had just had no feelings for them, that it would turn me into something I didn't want to be. So I got out here, and then I went back into this Resident Evil barn and turned off their machines and told the people to attack the black suits. So one of the old men, comes, walks out of his house and by the shed and saw me, and he froze and saw some of his experiments come out of the door. And then another one came from the back of the door. So they were coming from around here and here. And one of them went up to him right about here. It probably infected him. I don't really know what happened. I just heard shots. I was standing right here from the rifle, which came from here. Clear shot. Because this is the tower